Radio check. Loud and clear.
KSL Sports and KSL Podcast present Mode Push, an American view of F1, starting now.
I'm stuck. He's looking cut with his honestly.
I'm gutted. I'm absolutely gutted.
I enjoyed this so much. Thank you.
All right, everybody, welcome on in. It is another edition of Mode Push, an American view of F1. Alex Curie, Dan Jimenez joining you for another week of getting you ready for your race weekend, getting you through the things that remain from last race weekend, as well as we just finished up the Hungarian Grand Prix, and now we're getting ourselves ready for Spa this upcoming week. I always love the race weeks, Dan Jimenez, where we don't have to wait that long, and this is one of those. Here we are, and a prediction of rain at Spa, at least early in the forecast. So these are all the things that make me excited about a race weekend in Belgium. How is it, man?
Good. Yeah. Doubleheader, back to back is always a fun time, but we're going to be going into the summer break here. So hopefully we're left with a very exciting race to wet our whistle to get through the summer holiday and get back to racing on the second half of the year.
This is something that Americans do need to take note on from the Europeans, right? Hey,
oh yeah,
it's August. And it doesn't exist in our world. Like, it just is like, it is a black spot on the calendar. Don't call me. I mean, I'm going to take some time here because football season is about to start up, and that's my busy season. And so I'm going to try to sneak in a couple of days off. But at the same time, it's like, man, I get jealous of, and actually, I think one year we did go. We took a trip to Europe one year, and it was in August, and it was just funny because we're looking around, we're like, no one's here. They're like, they're gone, dude. Like, they're on vacation. So it's actually, if you're planning on a vacation, this is actually a good time to do it in Europe because, the cities might be a little bit more sparse. I would avoid the south of France. I would avoid the south of Spain, the Portugal coast. I would any of these places that a lot of these folks like to hit the Mediterranean. Can avoid all those. But if you go to the northern parts of or into Scandinavia, boom, you got yourself free ride on the boats as much as you want on those weekends. So the Hungarian Grand Prix. Should we start there, Dan? Because we didn't get to really do the full review here. I mean, I was fooled a little bit by McLaren telling us that, this track really isn't going to work for us. I don't know. Silverstone really worked to our strengths. What has Zach Brown and his team figured out? I mean, obviously, we'll get to the Red Bull stuff and how dominant they are, but I think it's pretty exciting to know that, they're while some teams are finding their updates not actually doing them any good, you've got McLaren that's actually making it work, and Lando with a second P2 in as many weeks.
Yeah, I mean, everyone was surprised by that result. It was great to see. It's been such an interesting season with teams up and down at different points of the season. And Red Bull's been the constant, but we had an era where Aston Martin was dominating, and then Ferrari seemed like they were going to make a resurgence. And then they quickly fell back down to being like the fifth fastest team. And then it was, Mercedes for a bit after they got their updates, and now it's McLaren. So, I mean, that number 2-3 spot in terms of the fastest team has been switching hands. And right now it looks like McLaren, and they might be distancing themselves for the rest of the season. And, it's hard to know what they've done outside of hitting copy paste on the Red Bull side pod floor. And I mean, there's even more comments after this last weekend around Sergio binned it in Q1, like the first lap of free practice one, right? So they had to lift the car back up. And so everybody hates that fresh look at the brand new floor. They brought a brand new floor, and it's like, Sergio, first thing he does is go out there and
shows everybody
and put it in the sand trap, shows everybody. So I think the teams are just kind of phasing in this kind of convergence upon a single most performant design that Red Bull has figured out. And that's creating more competition in that midfield, if you want to call it the midfield. It's kind of everybody that's not Red Bull, kind of from second to sixth, is all converging in and making it really competitive. And McLaren surprised, and it'll be interesting to see how they do in Spa. And we'll talk about Spa here in a bit. But given how they did at Silverstone, there'd be reason to think that they're going to be as dominant at Spa. But Andrea Stella, this week was starting to temper those expectations, and just some things that are unique about Spa that we don't often talk about. But I am all in on the McLaren train. Lando and Oscar are like just two fun young drivers to cheer for. And hopefully they get the chance to get back up there on the podium and not break another trophy.
Did you? The breaking of the trophy was an interesting one, because even today they had the media session as they're getting ready for Spa, and for the 1 millionth time, Lando Norris has been asked about the breaking of the trophy. It was a really weird moment, right? And then we start to get the breakdown of how long it takes to make those trophies, right? The cultural connection that it has to Hungary, right? This special type of handmade pottery, 60,000 euros worth of trophy, by the way. The tune changed quite a bit from, we're just having fun up there, and I didn't mean to knock it off and break it, but who cares, to Helmut Marko really shaming McLaren for their young driver breaking the trophy and saying that they should pay for it out of their own pocket. To then Lando today making the apology tour about the trophy, to Max not acting like it was that big of a deal. But I would be freaking furious if my piece of hardware that was like a one-off, and somebody brought it up too. They were like, these drivers don't care about trophies anymore, and it's a freaking shame, because all they do is they go, awesome, there's my trophy. They don't even touch it. It just goes back to the factory or whatever. Somebody else takes it, but they don't really care about it these days. It was a weird moment, and it was a bummer, because that's a really, really cool and unique trophy that F1 has at the Hungarian Grand Prix.
Yeah, of all the places for this to happen, it happens at Hungary, where they've been making this
for like 8
ceramic,
months.
Very delicate. Like, they've made it for 8 months, but it's been the same kind of trophy made by the same group for decades. There's like lots of history and national pride in it. And of course, that's the one that Lando breaks. He's not going to break like the Las Vegas, whatever junk trophy that's going to be. I don't know.
I love how the Vegas race has now turned into a hiss and a byword, just because of how expensive it's become and how weird Liberty Media is being about it. We'll get into that in a minute, though, too. Yeah, what will the Vegas trophy be? Just one of those.
It's got to be something from like the all-you-can-eat buffet, right? Like the chocolate fountain.
Just a crab leg. Oh, the chocolate fountain.
Crab legs.
The chocolate fountain already kind of looks like a trophy, but when they get up onto the podium, you have to fire it up. That's when you actually fire it up.
It'll be that or a miniaturized version of Trump Tower.
Hey. Anything to make it look like Vegas. I'm trying to think, because you can't put a fake Eiffel Tower on there. You can't put the skyline of New York City on there, both which have some weird spot there in Vegas. I'm trying to think that would make it. Yeah, I mean, you could do the stupid sign, the Welcome to Vegas sign, but that doesn't seem classy enough for F1. But yeah, so you had that whole thing that went down. But let's get to the Red Bull part of it, which was, as soon as everybody thought that everyone was kind of gaining on Red Bull and Max Verstappen especially, it was maybe the most dominant win based off of the fact that everybody had been getting closer. And it was a freaking joke, because, what was it, a 34-second win? And even then, they were going really half-heartedly through that race, it seemed like, at the end. At one point, the engineers had to dip in with Max. They're like, everything good? He's like, yeah, it's fine. And it was not even interesting for him, it seemed like. And he put it like, hey, it was a little bit boring, because it was just a perfect car for the weekend. Disheartening for fans who wanted to see the top, that gap be sort of shortened a little bit. What are we getting from this Red Bull situation? Because I thought that everything was working out to where everybody was catching up to him.
Yeah, that's how it felt after Silverstone with only a 3-second win. And we get to Hungary and they bring another round of updates. And one of those updates was their side pods. In the whole shaping of the side pod, the intake is skinnier and wider, which makes for a bigger undercut, which is that huge vacant space underneath the side pod. Mm-hmm. And it's angled differently now, and it's just forcing the air in a different direction. So new concept that they've innovated, and it really worked at Hungary. But in qualifying and practice, we thought maybe they're not going to be as competitive. Obviously, Lewis getting the pole by 3/1000ths of a second was super exciting, and it just looked maybe this is going to be the week that Red Bull falters. But they had set that car up for race pace to manage the tires, And as soon as Lewis had his poor start and Max got around him, it was over.
Yeah, and, it was interesting, too, because it was the same type of, reaction I think that we had the week before, a little less so because but Lando and Piastri just immediately throwing themselves into the mix and being a part of that of the front of that race was another kind of shock. I think we were all going, oh, my goodness, they really do. McLaren really has brought it. McLaren has figured something out. And then I've already gotten the sandbagging of, but Spa's not great for us. Like, I've already started to hear that a lot this week as well. But, all the storylines that happen there when you have the podium that you do, when you have, Max winning by the amount that he did, Checo having like a recovery drive, obviously, to get back to that third place winning driver of the day on a day that Danny Rick came back to the grid. It was interesting, but I just love having McLaren up on the podium again because that's a guy who seems to have been earning everything because Lando is one of those drivers that everybody looks at and goes, yeah, he's one of the up-and-coming guys in the sport, and he hasn't been able to really prove it until now that the car has been a little bit more behaving underneath him because I think that everybody was just assuming that McLaren was going to be bad for another year, and that's to have that type of turnaround, I don't know historically if you can go from we don't know what we're doing the beginning of the season to now halfway through the season looking at it and going, no, they could legitimately be a top 2 or 3 team by the end of the season.
Yeah, it's one of the greatest mid-season swings we've ever seen, and especially just compared to how bad they were to start the year. Like even straight out of winter testing, they just were terrible. And Lando's showing us that he is a championship caliber driver. Like he's going to win races. And if he can get in the right car, he can challenge for championships. And then Oscar is not that far off. He had a little bit of bad luck in Hungary because they had to pit Lando first to cut off, I guess, the undercut from Hamilton, which ended up giving him the undercut on Piastri. Mm-hmm. So even though like Oscar had that really good start,
I think we saw that. I think we saw the pace was with Lando, though, right? I mean, like he was the stronger driver of the two, and that is a bummer, to say, man, he could have had his first podium. But I think in the end, they were lapping, and Lando was the guy who was getting 3/10 and 4/10 on those laps on his teammate, kind of toward the end.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I've got an analysis pulled up here from the Formula Data Analysis guy on Twitter that he kind of extracted the averages of all the different teams and compared them. So Norris on average was 4/10 of a lap faster than Piastri. So you're right on the nose, 4/10, which was pretty good. But Verstappen, Max was half a second a lap faster than Sergio. Hamilton was 4/10 faster than Russell, Norris 4/10 faster than Piastri, Leclerc and Sainz were dead even, Alonso and Stroll, Alonso was 3/10 faster, and Danny Rick was a quarter of a second faster than Yuki. And so I think we saw some, interesting trends there with like Ricardo straight out of the gate having, even though he kind of had that issue in the first corner with, we can get into Alfa Romeo and their just disastrous start with Joe Guanyu. Right. It was like the worst possible way to start that race, but that knocked Danny to the back, and he had to take a different strategy to the race. But putting that all aside, he was still consistently faster than Yuki, and Yuki's been driving that car for years. It's really incredible at what Danny Rick was able to do on Sunday.
At the media session today, after last week, I think everybody knows that the car that's underneath him is not a Red Bull, right? I mean, that's pretty clear. So your expectation is to maybe just beat your teammate, which he did. But today at the media sessions, Danny Rick was being asked questions. He goes, I think it's really fun that you guys still kind of like me. I thought you guys would ask me questions last week and then forget about me. But everybody's still interested to see what Danny Rick is going to do before the summer break here. And I know that Red Bull seems like big giant dirtbags for making the move that they did with a couple of races left before the halfway point of the season. But when you look at it now, if they're able to get 2 races under the belt of Danny Rick, they could just propel themselves even a little bit more going into that second half of the season. So what does it look like? What do the upgrades that going into what kind of things happen in the summer? Is it wind tunnel time, or do they don't the factories get shut down to some point? At what point can these teams work on their cars at least a little bit, or is it just one of those things where you have to make hay right now because nobody touches the cars during that month off?
Yeah, they really do take a sizable chunk of that month off completely. So we're getting into the phase of the year where you're getting through to your like last wave of upgrades on this current year's car before you switch over to development to next year. And there's already lots of talk about how basically teams are trying to establish their platform for what next year's car is going to be. So we'll see. We have seen some upgrades come through for this week. And we'll see probably the last wave of upgrades in the first few races after the summer break. But then after that, I expect that all that R&D and attention is going to go towards next year's car, and teams will just know what they have. And it'll be interesting to see if the other teams can't catch up to McLaren, Red Bull aside, how much ground McLaren can make up in that last half of the season where the development is a bit more frozen than it was during the early parts of the season.
So tell me what does the tire qualifying experiment that they had last week, was it a success, and do they continue to do it? Is that how they're going to do this, or was that just a test for what was your assessment of how that worked on top of how it's going to work the rest of the season, or if what's Spa going to look like when it comes to that?
I thought it was one of the most entertaining qualifying sessions we've had all year, and especially with Lewis, eking out the pole right there at the end. I was a fan of it. I hope they do it again. I'm pretty sure they're planning on doing it at least once or twice more this season. And they did it out of the spirit of like, we're giving you fewer tire sets, but I think that you could still do it even if you had 13 tire sets instead of 11. You could still make the same mandate but I think for me as a fan, it was just easier to keep track of, okay, who's going out on what tires? Sometimes that can get a little bit confusing. Are they used? Are they, brand new sets? And you were able, I think, to follow in qualifying. I was able to follow a little bit easier and just know apples to apples, like where the pace was coming from or who had the pace right out of the gate during a session. And so I hope they bring it back. I thought it was a good tweak. What
kind of changes get made for Belgium then from the Hungarian to Spa? Because I've already started to look at some of these teams. Side pods or cooling inlets, fine, but rear wings are getting tweaked pretty big time too. So what's kind of the wisdom engineering wise on going into Spa compared to other racetracks?
Yeah, so Hungary is a relatively slow course because it's short and twisty. And so you want to run high downforce because you're not making a lot of downforce already because of the speed of the car. So you got to have a big wing, what they call like a loaded rear wing. You go to now that we're going to Spa has some really long straights, long sweeping corners, and that high speed allows them to create more downforce from like the ground effect of the car. And that means they can run smaller wings in the back like you would at Monza, for example. And so we'll see probably some more of like an intermediate wing, and might see some differences between teams relative to where their strengths are. And so I think it plays again into Red Bull's favor and where their strengths are, that they're just fast. They're at their fastest when they're at the highest speed tracks. And so Max has also said that this is his favorite track on the circuit. So I wouldn't bet against them. I think they're going into where they're absolutely their strongest, but we'll see, can McLaren continue to eat away at that advantage like they did at Silverstone?
So I saw a meme today because the Spa forecast for this weekend is rain. I know it's crazy, but there could be some rain in Belgium. And I was wondering who the best person is in the rain. I think Lewis Hamilton's numbers are really good, but I mean, in that 2014 to 2022 era, it didn't matter what the conditions were. Mercedes typically had the best car, bar none. And now in the last couple of years, same thing with Red Bull. And so we sort of artificially go, oh, the best drivers in the rain are Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen. But I know that people that get a lot of kudos in the rain are typically guys like Alex Albon. I know that Checo is also kind of a good rain driver. Fernando Alonso obviously is pretty darn good in the wet and kind of any conditions that F1 can throw at him. But how much of that does it count on a weekend like this, and who really are the best weather drivers, I guess, the rain drivers on the grid?
Yeah, the ones that you've mentioned. Another one that comes to mind is Lance Stroll. Like he's had some pretty good wet races as well. And basically, what does that do? I mean, you lose the ability to use the KERS, like the energy recovery system, the electric battery motor, like that. They don't run that when it's raining. And so, a team like Red Bull, who might have an advantage on the power side of things when they use their hybrid battery, they lose that when they're in the rain. And so with that, there's no DRS as well when the rain turns on. So it really just it comes down to just raw talent and being able to keep the traction. And for newer fans who might not be familiar, in your road going car, you have traction control, and in F1, there is no traction control, at least active, like electronic traction control. So it's really in the hands of the driver to be able to put the speed down. And at Spa, you've got like 3 slow corners that lead into long straights. And so you gain or lose most of your time coming out of those slow corners. And like turn 1 is a really sharp, I think it's over a 90-degree corner, almost 180-degree corner. Wow. That leads to the Kemmel Straight. And the Kemmel Straight is this kind of very infamous part of the track where we've unfortunately in the last few years had 2 different drivers lose their lives coming up over the Kemmel Straight onto the Kemmel Straight from Urouge, the long sweeping uphill turn.
Right. And
that in the rain is, I think, probably the scariest place in motorsports anywhere in the globe.
Sort of blind, and coming
it's
around
blind.
There.
Yeah, blind. And because you're cresting over the hill, you get this negative G effect, like you're on a roller coaster.
Harder to control.
So the car is lifting and becoming more weightless as it comes over that crest, and you still have some steering input into it, and so you have lateral G that those tires are trying to hold on to in the wet. But if you lift coming up onto that straight, you're going to lose a ton of time. So it becomes this challenge of courage. And we've just unfortunately had 2 terrible accidents. And so going into the weekend, there's been a lot of talk. And George Russell, I think he's like the director of the Drivers Association. He's been talking about or talking with F1 and the FIA about the decision around, okay, if it's going to rain this weekend, when do we call it? Like the drivers obviously are a lot more, I think, attuned to the risks at Spa, specifically in the rain, highlighted by the recent death of a young 18-year-old Dutch driver, Delano van Toff. And so I think that, we saw it a couple years ago when it rained a bunch, they ran one parade lap around under the safety car and then canceled it. And I think that is a real risk this weekend, even more so with just kind of the recent tragedy. And it sounds like the drivers led by George Russell are already talking actively about it. And let's hope that doesn't happen. Let's hope we get a dry race or a moderately wet race, but not a full rain out.
So how does it look this weekend then? There's nothing that seems to be stopping Red Bull, rain included. But if there's going to be a surprise on the podium, could there be one? Or McLaren says that this is definitely not their strength of changing their rear wings and changing a little bit of their speed setup. But you do have people who are bringing upgrades to the track, among them Aston Martin, among them Mercedes. Is this another weekend where Lewis Hamilton is challenging for another podium? They seem to be as depressed about the gap as anybody. Toto, I think, referred to Red Bull this week as them being in F1 and everybody else sort of basically being in F2. That was demoralizing if you were somebody listening from the AMG Petronas team.
Yeah. This has just been a strange year. The one constant is Max, and then everything else is up and down every other week. Mm-hmm. So I hear McLaren saying like, hey, we're not good out of the slow corners, and you got to be good out of the slow corners to be fast at Spa. But I don't know. I think that they've got the mojo going, and they're going to continue to get the most out of these upgrades. And so my surprise for the weekend would be a Lando pole. If he can get out front, a Lando win. I think that would be my dark horse candidate, I guess, if you want to call it, for a surprise this weekend, and an Oscar Piastri podium. So double podium for McLaren.
Wow. Double podium, not just double points. I'm still waiting for that moment when I'm not going to say Williams double points. I'm not going to do that. But you know what I'm going to do? Logan Sargent points this weekend for Williams. Okay?
This is a good track for Williams.
All right.
For sure.
I think this is one of those, and I'm not saying that Albon couldn't be, but I don't want to jinx them both like that. But I want Logan Sargent to get his first points in F1 before the break. Maybe take some pressure off and then come back and just come out firing from the summer break. And that's what I'm hoping for this weekend. Just give me that 9th place. Give me that 10th place. I'd like not just 1 point, which almost feels more insulting sometimes when you're like, I got my first point, and you go, yeah, but let's make it 8th place and you get a few points instead of just one. But that's my prediction for this weekend is Williams, a Logan Sargent points finish. I'm going to go, it's going to be a Max and Checo 1-2, and then 3rd place is going to be George Russell. That's going to be my prediction for this weekend. Okay, Dan, before we get out, what any other thoughts on Spa or anything else coming up before the summer break here?
Just this news out of Las Vegas with Liberty Media kind of shaking down all the casinos. There's just it's
who shakes down the casinos better than the mafia, bro? F1.
Yeah, this is the town the mafia built, right? It's
what is going on?
I've seen Godfather 2, right? So I know how this business works, right?
But what on earth? What on earth are they trying to do to make this even more difficult? It's already a tough race to get into for even people who live not that far away from it, like we do, and we still cannot bring ourselves to spend that type of money to go to the race.
Yeah, the New York Post reporting this week that Liberty Media has sent a notice to all the casinos and restaurants that are on the race circuit that they have to fork up $1,500 per head of people that they expect to be there in the race, like whatever their occupancy is times $1,500. Or Liberty Media will start putting up obstructions so that you cannot see the racetrack from your hotel or your restaurant or your casino, which sounds like almost an impossible task, right? Like, I don't know how they wall off the entire city.
I get it. You don't want to have the T-bone steak and eggs for $6.99 guy having a good seat when somebody paid $6,000. But like, if you're in a hotel that's on the freaking strip, you can't tell those hotels what to do with how to charge those people because you're asking them to just put a $1,500 tax on everybody that comes to the hotel that weekend. Even, you're in Circus and you want to see the race. It's $39 that night, except for it's going to be $1,539 for that night. Come on, man. That's crazy. I don't know.
This is the loophole that we should have thought of. We should have gotten a spot at Circus on the 15th floor, and we would have been set.
I'm telling you, like, it's suddenly we fell in love with that race, and we're slowly starting to hate it more and more before it even happens in November. It's crazy.
Yeah, for some of these places, like a restaurant, Dave & Buster's or whatever it is out there on the main strip is going to be like a $2 to $3 million price tag that those restaurants have to pony up, or else they're just going to lose business the entire weekend with a temporary wall in front of the restaurant.
We won't charge you $1,500 a head to listen to the F1 podcast that is Mode Push. So that's our promise to you. For Dan Jimenez and Alex Curie, Dan, enjoy the race this weekend. We'll chat with you again. We'll get some breakdowns during the summer break. We don't want to leave you totally hanging. We don't get the month off, so we'll be back for more. For Dan, I'm Alex. We'll see you next time on Mode Push, everybody.